Musical musings, musical musings, musical musings, musical musings.
Hello and good afternoon, everyone. Welcome back to the latest episode of Musical Musings. We air this program every Wednesday at 1 p.m. and broadcast it to you from Rachmakan, University of Technology, Peranakan. We bring this program to you in two parts. For the first part, I will introduce to you an artist and a song. We'll discuss the background of the artist a little bit, and then we'll discuss the background of the song, along with its main themes. That means like what the song is about. Then, we'll take a break and listen to the song. And in the second part of our program, we will come back and analyze the lyrics. We will look at anything that's especially difficult, any difficult vocabulary, slang, or idioms. Anything that's hard to understand. My name is Gary Gray, and I am your host for the Musical Musings program. I'm an American English teacher here at Rachmakan, University of Technology, Peranakan. I've been teaching here for over 8 years now. So I've been here a while, and I do like to incorporate music into my classroom sometimes, which is why I am hosting this musical program for you. So for today's episode, we are going to be doing the song Crazy Train by Ozzy Osbourne. Now, we are doing this song for a specific reason this week. I don't do a lot of heavy metal on this program. I think it's a little too loud for most people. I actually do like some heavy metal bands. We have done the band Sabaton before. They're heavy metal. I do like them. We did a weird one. One episode, we did a band called The Who, not WHO. We've done them as well. But there's a band called The Who, H-U. They're actually a Mongolian band. So it was a little weird to do them, because most of their music is in their language. But we did have a song where they were coupled with a English-speaking artist, so the lyrics were done in English. We have done them before, so we have done some heavy metal before. In fact, I think we might have done Ozzy Osbourne or his band that he was with, Black Sabbath. I think we have done them once before. I'm not certain of that. But we may have done them one other time before. But I don't do a lot of heavy metal on here. I think it's a little too loud. Most people probably don't want to listen to that. But we're doing it this week for a special reason. So as of the date that we are recording this, it's just over a week. It's actually a little closer to 2 weeks now. It's about 2 weeks since Ozzy Osbourne passed away. We're filming this in early August of 2025, and he passed away on July 22nd of 2025. So just a couple of weeks ago. We could have done this episode last week, except that I already had an episode ready to go and already planned. I could have swapped them. I could have done this one last week and then done a different one this week, but I wasn't really prepared for the Ozzy Osbourne one yet, so we're doing it this week. So I like to do tributes to artists who have passed away. So we are doing our tribute to Ozzy Osbourne with his song Crazy Train this week. All right, so a little bit about Ozzy, which is basically what most people call him. He's so famous, most people just call him by his first name, and they just say Ozzy. In the music industry, if you say Ozzy, just about everyone knows who you're talking about, even if they don't really like heavy metal, because he even had his own television program, and there was also a lot of controversy around him. We'll talk about that a little bit here. Back in the 1980s, so his name is well known within music, especially in Western culture. Maybe not so much here in Thailand, but in Western culture, if you're into music, all you got to say is Ozzy, and everyone knows who you mean. Okay, so he was born in 1948, so I believe he did not have his birthday yet this year. I believe that's the case, so I think he was 76 when he passed away. I believe that's how old he was. And he is from Britain. He's a British singer. And as I mentioned, he does heavy metal. He was very controversial, especially in the early 1980s. Even before then, because he was the lead singer of the band Black Sabbath, starting in 1967. Actually, they were not Black Sabbath in 1967. They changed their name a couple of times. They changed a couple of their band members, but kind of the core band remained together. So it was really the same group of people that got together in 1967. But they didn't choose the name Black Sabbath until 1969. So technically, he wasn't with Black Sabbath until 1969, but it was a lot of the same band. So he was with the same group of people since 1967. So even during that time, since he was their lead singer, there was a lot of controversy surrounding Ozzy Osbourne. Part of it was just because he did crazy stuff on the stage. For example, he's known for biting the head off of a bat, which is really crazy. There's some debate as to whether or not he even did that, but I believe he did. He's a crazy guy. And the other reason was the culture. During that time, from the 1970s into the 1980s, Western countries, especially the U.S. and Britain, which of course is where Ozzy Osbourne would be the most famous, they were going through this political, cultural shift that was going more conservative. It was going much more conservative. For example, in Britain, they voted for a conservative prime minister, Margaret Thatcher. And in America, we voted for a Republican president. The Republicans in America are more conservative, with Ronald Reagan. So both countries were kind of going more towards conservative policies. And because of that, there was more influence with things like religion. And in fact, I grew up in this environment. My family was very conservative. I'm not very conservative now, which is why I kind of like Ozzy Osbourne. But so with religion, there was something within the Christian religion, which is the biggest religion in those Western countries, where there was this phenomenon called the Satanic Panic, where honestly, some of the things they believed were just crazy. I don't like saying that because it sounds like I'm making fun of the religion. I'm not really making fun of the religion at all. I was brought up in that religion. Most of my family continues to practice that religion. I have a lot of friends that practice that religion. It was this certain kind of segment of that religion that had these crazy beliefs about this satanic panic idea. And that was that there was all of these heavy metal bands were into Satan, which once you learn more about the story and the background, the history of Ozzy Osbourne, you realize that all the crazy stuff he did on stage and wearing all the black and all the black makeup, and it's all part of the show. It's all part of the act. He's actually a pretty decent guy. Oh, he did have some problems. He went through a period, in fact, this is why Black Sabbath kicked him out of their band. He went through a period in life where he was just into really heavy substance abuse, drinking, drugs, things like that. And so I mentioned that he was kicked out. So yes, he started with Black Sabbath in 67, technically 69, because that's when they picked the name Black Sabbath. And then in 1977, 1978, he was kind of in and out of the band as he was trying to start his solo career. And then in 1979, the band just told him to get out. They kicked him out. Now, Ozzy would argue that that's not really why they kicked him out. There were other reasons. The reason he says that's not why they kicked him out is because he admits that, yes, he was really into drinking and drugs and things like that. But he said, so are all the rest of the guys. They were just as bad as I was. And they're kicking me out. So he doesn't think that's why, but that's the story they tell. So in 1979, he was kicked out of the band, and he went solo after that, meaning that he just did his own performances. Now, obviously, he's not just singing by himself, doing heavy metal without any musicians. So some of the musicians that he used were musicians like that maybe used to be with Black Sabbath, and he also had a whole bunch of other people that he would pull in, other artists, because it was really supposed to be focused on just him. He was a solo artist, so he'd just grab whoever he could. I should point out, though, that they did seem to reconcile, at least to some degree, even though Black Sabbath kicked him out, because they did reunite several times after that for performances. So it seemed like they kind of made up. But for the most part, after 79, even though they did reunite at times, they didn't reunite like for long periods of time. So he was basically just Ozzy Osbourne after 1979. It was just him. And he has been performing ever since. In fact, when he died, just a couple of weeks before we're recording this, that was just a couple of weeks after he completed his last tour. Now, he was not healthy. Everyone knew he didn't have a whole long time to live. He had a disease. I believe he had Parkinson's disease, if I remember correctly. So he would basically just sit in the chair while he was on stage and sing into the mic. And there would also be other singers to kind of help him out because it was hard for him to even do a full concert. So there would be like tributes to him with other people singing, and so he didn't have to do the whole show by himself. It was sad and touching at the same time. The thing that was sad about it is when he's on stage, he was always kind of crazy and kind of running around a lot, and so he'd be sweating a lot, and he was very active on stage. To see him just sitting in a chair, and he's kind of slumped down in the chair because he's got a disease. He doesn't have a lot of energy. It's kind of sad to see him like that. But it was also kind of touching because you could see that he really wanted to do this for the fans. Even though he didn't have that much energy, his singing voice was still relatively strong. There were times, he's a heavy metal singer, so you got to really sing loudly. There were times his voice got a little weak, so it wasn't perfect. But for someone of his age and with his problems, it wasn't too bad. It wasn't too bad. He did a good job. So he only just stopped performing right before he died. All right, so the song we're going to do today is probably his most popular song. It's Crazy Train. Most people who are big fans of his, they'll prefer some other songs. I think everyone still likes Crazy Train. It's a fun song. But you really get, when you really get into an artist, you really discover some of their other songs. And so for most people that really like him, they have other songs by him that they prefer. I'm not even that big of an Ozzy fan, and even for me, this is not my favorite song by him. It's probably number 2 or 3. It's right up there. I do really like this song, but this is not my favorite song by him. We're doing it just because it's the most popular song. My favorite song is his song, Mr. Crowley. But this song is Crazy Train. And again, it's probably his most popular one. Now, when I say it's his most popular one, I mean as a solo artist. There are songs that were done by Black Sabbath, which maybe he still performed afterwards, but they're actually Black Sabbath songs. There are some very famous Black Sabbath songs, which I'm not including as being Ozzy songs. All right, so this song came out in 1980, so this was on, I believe, his first solo album. I believe this was off of Blizzard of Oz, which was his first solo album. And again, I talk about this many times, how sometimes their best hits come off of one of their first albums. Now, you may argue, well, this isn't really his first album, because he was the lead singer of Black Sabbath for so long. Still, This is his first album, and this is probably his most popular song. So this came out in 1980. It's really about the Cold War and like the fear of destruction. Back then, we were having kind of this nuclear arms race going on. There's still fears of stuff like that. I mean, you see right now, as I record this, with what's going on in Ukraine, and sometimes Russia threatens to use nuclear weapons and things like that. So it's still a little bit crazy. But back then, it was really crazy. It was really crazy, like in the 1960s, 70s, and even into the early 80s. And this came out in the early 80s, 1980. You get into the late 80s, and the USSR, the Soviet Union, kind of fell at that time, and there were some peace deals being made, things like that. But in the early 80s, it was still pretty crazy. So people were worried about nuclear war and everyone dying. Now, the interesting thing about this song is I say it's probably his most popular song. It never made the Billboard's top 100 list in the U.S. Well, I say never. It did. Just very recently. It got to, I believe it's number 46. I didn't write that in my notes here, but I believe it was number 46. But just recently, after his passing. Everyone's listening to his stuff now because he just died. So it made the list this year. But like when it came out, it never made the top 100 songs. It made some of the kind of subgroup lists in 1980 and 81, but not like the overall top 100. The reason really is pretty simple. As I said back then, heavy metal was somewhat controversial, so it wasn't really as mainstream. It's pretty mainstream now. I mean, I'm not saying that everyone listens to it, but I mean, it's just now for most people, it's just music. It is what it is. It's not really that controversial. I mean, there are some bands, certain people that are still controversial, but mostly it's not. It's just music. But back then, it was controversial. And so there was this big chunk of people who would never, ever listen to this music. And so because of that, it's hard for heavy metal songs from back then to really get all the way up into the top 100. Especially from someone like Ozzy Osbourne, who he himself was personally controversial as well. There are some heavy metal bands that were less controversial. For example, I would consider Led Zeppelin to just be a rock band, but a lot of people consider them heavy metal because some of their songs are pretty heavy, heavy rock sound. I'd have to go look at their history and see how many songs they had make the top 100, but I'm certain Led Zeppelin probably had several songs make the top 100. So there are some bands back then that maybe were a little less controversial, but Ozzy Osbourne, if anything, was more controversial than most. So yeah, that's why this never made the top 100. It's not because it wasn't popular. It's just that there was a certain set of people that would never listen to it. All right, so let's go ahead and get to the song. We've talked enough about this. This was a pretty long opening. Luckily, the words are not that crazy. It's not that long. The words aren't that crazy. The name of the song is Crazy Train. It's not that long. So we'll go through that pretty quickly. It's a pretty easy song to understand. Mostly. There's a few things in here that are a little weird, but mostly it's pretty easy. So we'll go through the second part of our program a little bit quickly. Okay, so let's go ahead and get to the song. And for those of you watching by YouTube, as always, because of copyright issues, we cannot embed the video here. So please click on the link in the upper right. That'll take you to the video. Once the video is over, you can click back here for the second part of our program. Everyone else, if you're on radio or streaming, you should be able to listen just fine. All right, let's get to the song.
Musical musings, musical musings, musical musings, musical
Welcome back. All right, so that is a song about living in fear during the Cold War. That's Crazy Train by Ozzy Osbourne. So first of all, just to explain the name of the song, Crazy Train, if you say that someone's on the crazy train, basically it kind of means that. It's crazy. But if you're on the crazy train, it means you're kind of heading that way. In other words, it's getting crazier and crazier and crazier and crazier and crazier. So things are getting worse and worse and worse. So we're talking about the Cold War, and it's crazy. People are worried about nuclear war. Okay, so we start the song, and he just starts out with All Aboard, and then kind of yells a little bit. All right, so All Aboard is what in America and probably in Britain, since he is British, I'm not sure. But at least in America, all aboard is what a train conductor says to tell everyone to get on the train. So it's kind of funny that the name of the song is Crazy Train, because, you wouldn't really want to get on the train. But we start out with that because it's like you have no choice. You are on this train because you live in this world, because, again, we're talking about the Cold War and nuclear war. It's like, okay, you're on the train. Get on, all aboard. All right, and we start the first verse out. Crazy, but that's how it goes. Millions of people living as foes. All right, this is simple enough to understand. Foes means like enemies. And he starts out by saying it's crazy, but that's how it goes. And when you say that's how it goes, it means that's just how it is. And the reason I think he's saying it's crazy is because why are they foes? It's really their governments that are against each other. You don't know them. It's just like recently with the conflict going on between Thailand and Cambodia. How many Cambodians do you actually know? Maybe a few. And you might actually like them. I don't know. It's a little crazy that everyone picks sides. Okay? We continue on. Maybe it's not too late to learn how to love and forget how to hate. All right, that's easy enough. Maybe it's not too late. When you say maybe it's not too late, it means exactly that. He's hoping that we're not too far down the line, too close to this war. He hopes we're not too close to that, so maybe we can back up and learn how to love each other instead of hating one another. I told you, he's not as bad of a guy as it sounds. The song sounds crazy. The name of the song is Crazy Train. He looks crazy. This is actually a song about fear, and you'll see that in the chorus especially, but he's trying to promote peace here. Learn how to love and forget how to hate. Okay, we get to the chorus. Mental wounds not healing. Life's a bitter shame. I'm going off the rails on a crazy train. Okay. First of all, mental wounds not healing. Now, that could refer to any number of things. A mental wound would mean like fear. Hey, I mean mental, so you're talking about emotion or something like that. A mental wound. So it's going to be a negative emotion. In this case, so again, that could mean a lot of things. I mean, after being hurt from a breakup or something like that with your boyfriend or girlfriend, you might have mental wounds. And mental wounds not healing. In other words, you're not getting over it. In this case, because we specifically know he's talking about the Cold War, he's probably talking about the fear. Because they used to do drills in like elementary school. So little kids had to like jump and hide under their desks. As if that would save you from a nuclear bomb blast, but that's what they did. I guess they had to try to make people feel better. So that's a mental wound, As a kid, you're a little kid. You're 5, 6, 7 years old, and you're learning about how to protect yourself from getting burned alive from a nuclear bomb. It's crazy. So mental wounds not healing. Life's a bitter shame. When you say something's a bitter shame, it just means it's kind of sad. So all of this bad stuff going on. And then he says, I'm going off the rails on a crazy train. So when you say you're going off the rails, it means you're going the wrong way. You're just and a lot of times it does mean you're crazy. If you're off the rails, you're going crazy. So he says he's on a crazy train. So basically, all of this stuff is driving him nuts. All this bad stuff going on in the world. Okay? Then we get to the second verse. I've listened to preachers. I've listened to fools. I've watched all the dropouts who make their own rules. Okay, listen to preachers. That's fine. Listen to fools. Okay. Well, who is he referring to there as fools? I'm not sure, but there are a lot of people that talk a lot and aren't really very smart. So there are a lot of fools out there that do a lot of talking. I've watched all the dropouts who make their own rules. Okay, so a dropout, you're usually referring to, now there's a couple different ways to interpret this. I think he just means the standard way. When you talk about a dropout, you're talking about usually someone that quits school before they graduate. And he says who make their own rules. Well, a lot of them do stuff like that. Like a lot of musicians, for example, were dropouts. They don't, by making their own rules, what he means is not following the standard of society, where you graduate from high school, maybe you go to college. Fewer people went to college back when this song was written, but it was becoming more and more of a thing. So maybe you go to college, you get a job, you have a wife and kids and buy a house and blah, blah, blah. So these are people who are not really doing that. Maybe eventually they would. We call that settling down once they do that. So maybe they'd eventually settle down. But they're going out there and doing things their own way. So I watched all the dropouts who make their own rule. One person conditioned to rule and control. The media sells it, and you live the role. Okay, so one person conditioned to rule and control. This line is confusing because I don't think it means exactly what it sounds like. I don't think he's talking about a single person who is put in power to rule and control. I think what it's saying when it says conditioned to, I think it means more like conditioned for. In other words, we are conditioned as people to be ruled over and controlled over. Either it's from religion, remember he says he listened to preachers, religion telling you what to do, or the government telling you what to do. So we're always being told what to do. We're conditioned for rule and control. And then the media usually goes right along with it. I mean, in Western society, there is sort of a free and fair media, but even now it's getting a little bit... For example, we just recently had an issue in America where a couple of media companies are kind of giving in to the government to do what the government is telling them to do. So the media is selling it. The media sells it, and you live the role. So once you see it in the media is also telling you what you're supposed to do, so you live the role. In other words, you do exactly what they're all telling you to do. Obviously, he's saying this isn't a good thing. We should all be ourselves. We should all be free, etc., etc. Okay, so then we do the chorus again. He does change it a little bit. He says, mental wounds still screaming, driving me insane. Okay, going off the rails on a crazy train. Okay, but there's not really any change of meaning there very much. Mental wounds screaming, so in other words, they're bothering him, and he's going insane, driving me insane. Okay, then we get this short little piece that I'd maybe call a bridge. It says, I know that things are going wrong for me. You got to listen to my words. So in other words, what he's saying there is that even though he's not okay because of everything that's going on. So he's actually speaking wisely. So you've got to listen to his words. Like when he said, learn how to love and forget how to hate. You got to listen to him. Okay, and then we get the last verse. Heirs of a Cold War, that's what we've become. Inherited troubles, I'm mentally numb. Okay, an heir is someone that inherits something. So he's saying heirs of the Cold War, that's what we've become. Inherited troubles, like I said, that's something you inherit. Inherited troubles, I'm mentally numb. To be numb means you can't even feel it. So he's just like, what am I even supposed to think about this? This is not a Cold War that we, I, him, people of his generation really started. The Cold War started almost right after World War II. So he was born in 1948. That is right around the end of World War II. Pretty close to it. So he was just born when the Cold War was starting. He didn't do it. The next generation above him did it. And maybe even one generation above that. I mean, that's getting a little bit older, but because that would be like his grandparents, but that's like his grandparents when he's a baby. So they're still only 40s, 50s year old, something like that. So it's the generation above him, 2 generations above him, that are responsible for the Cold War, and yet he's going to yet these people need to inherit it as they're now becoming adults, like they're responsible for it. And so he just doesn't even know what to think about it. He's mentally numb. Okay? We continue on. Crazy. I just cannot bear. I'm living with something that just isn't fair. Okay, again, it's the same idea. I'm living with something that isn't fair. In other words, why are we even living with this Cold War? We didn't start it. We have nothing to do with this. It started with our parents and our grandparents. All right? And then we get the last chorus, and again, they change it a little bit again. Mental wounds not healing. Okay, that's the same thing. But then we have the second line they change, and it says, who and what's to blame? So again, it's looking for why. Why is this happening? Who did this? Okay? And that's really the end of the song. I'm going off the rails on a crazy train. So that's Crazy Train by Ozzy Osbourne. And as we always end our program with, I'd like to give you some other songs by the artist to listen to. He's got a lot, but he's also got a lot with Black Sabbath. So I'm just going to give you the ones that are his songs, and I'm only going to list a few. But he's got a lot more than this. If you like this type of music, he's got a lot more. In fact, he's even got some softer songs. I'm gonna give you one of those. But some of his more popular ones are I Don't Know, Mr. Crowley, No More Tears, and Mama, I'm Coming Home. Mama, I'm Coming Home is a pretty soft one, and that one's kind of really sad right now because you could interpret it like he's singing about death. And he just died. So a lot of people who are big fans of his are listening to that song, and they're crying, and that's pretty sad. My favorite song of his is Mr. Crowley. I like that song. That's my favorite one. All right. And again, there are a lot of other songs by Black Sabbath that I'm not including here. So this is just songs by Ozzy. So I Don't Know, Mr. Crowley, No More Tears, and Mama, I'm Coming Home. All right, so that's it. That's Crazy Train by Ozzy Osbourne. Thank you for joining us for today's Musical Musings program. Any young people out there listening to this, I encourage you to look into our university. We've got a great one here at Rachamakan University of Technology, Peranakan. All right, please stay with us and tune back in next week for another great song. Also, don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Thank you.
Musical musings, musical musings, musical